You say a prayer for teacher and student. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Astu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us. May we work together with great energy. May our study be illumined. May we not unnecessarily cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So the subject for tonight will be roads to spiritual freedom. And if we select a topic like this, I suppose we have to start off with what do we mean by roads and freedom and all these other words. And there's a difficulty or confusion about the word spiritual. Very often a question is, what's the difference between religion and spiritual, or religious and spirituality? And so we can go into all of these things when we understand that the minute we are born, we are destined. Now the question is, destined for where? So it's a great phenomena that we're able to see all the progressions of a child being born, and we can see how in the initial phases a child is learning, and then a child has the impulse to roll over onto its tummy and then try to get up on knees, and then realizes, makes a discovery that it can crawl toward an object and ignores the parental advice, no and don't touch, and carries on anyway, exploring. So the minute we are born, really, we are virtually exploring. And when you explore, the implication is there must be something toward which you are moving. And we can register this over time. We have an experience of a small child growing, growing, growing. And we know the broad characteristics, psychological and physical, of growth that a child goes through. And a child becomes playful and gathers the experience as they're playing. Child is very naive because they're experiencing things most for the first time. And more information is being gathered, and more experiences are being gotten hold of and secured and filed away in memory, until ultimately we come to the adulthood. And I think Shakespeare makes a little fun, because eventually sans teeth, sans hair and all this, you go back to what you were as a baby. And some skeptics might say, every baby looks like Winston Churchill anyway, but I don't think that's very fair. But certainly, as you get older, there's a kind of you completing a cycle, and sometimes memory is also gone, and so on. You could view that life, I suppose, in that way, that it is a meaningless cycle. At the end of it, there's just death and nothing happens. But if we study the Upanishads, a question, a very good question, is asked always. We find it in the Kathopanishad. Some say that after this life, there is an extinction. Some say that there is an afterlife, and some say that maybe there is an absolute sense of freedom. I don't know, please tell me what it is. And so this question of birth, life, and death is with us throughout our whole adventure. But we are all working towards something. In fact, the whole of life, if you call it evolution, must mean that there is some kind of draw from outside, if you will, or draw from a destiny, and a push from inside, an urge to get there. These two things are there. And so in that sense, we're all on a journey. Is it an individual journey, though? Or is it a common journey? Are we all destined to go to the same place, as it were? And then we have to ask the question, is the whole universe also doing it? So these are some profound questions, and thinkers have thought very deeply about it. Let us suppose we're all on the same journey, but not the same road, not the same path. And yet, it's a bit like a mountain, I suppose, where there may be different approaches. But the aim is to get to the top. And when you get to the top, there's only one top. There's a very useful example in the Kathopanishad, and is echoed in the Bhagavad Gita also, of the body as a chariot. Because when we take a journey, we ourselves are doing the pilgrimage, and many, many people are inspired to go on pilgrimages in a formal sense. There's the Camino. Many, many people from Ireland and all over Europe and all over the world, for that matter, decide to walk, in some cases, 1,000 kilometers, or at least several hundred kilometers. Do it over 2 weeks. Some do it over months. Some do it in varying times. Some arrange for an advance stop on the way. Others take a chance. In any event, they're all destined for one place in the Camino. Now, like any journey, there will be diversions on the way if we're not careful. So if we really feel there's a destination and we feel it's worthwhile approaching it and arriving at it, if we want to get there quickly, then we'll make sure we ignore any of the diversions. In the same Kathopanishad, the teaching begins with Yam, the Lord of Death, telling Niketa the story, a small boy of 12. Look, there are actually two paths you can go along, two roads you can choose. You can choose one which looks quite smooth and doesn't give you many aches and pains and bumps. No twists and turns necessarily that are obvious to you. And this we can call pleasure. In other words, we can follow the directions of the senses. And no doubt there will be pleasure, but there will be short-lived. And there will be peaks and troughs, because you cannot sustain that pleasure for very long. Its very nature is to be absorbed and to go. And if our desire is to be fulfilled, if our desire is complete fullness and fulfillment, if we feel that there are no disappointments in our life, if we feel that there are no gaps, no hollows, then we'd be disappointed if we go along the one route where we have to keep filling up, we have to keep topping up. Like going on a journey in a car, at some stage or other you may have to put fuel in again, and again and again, and there'll be no end to it. Depending on your length of your journey, these are consumables. The other path is the preferable, and that might not look so pleasant, and yet it gives a long-lasting effect and takes us on a well-guided journey. What is the difference between these two paths? The one is filled with hidden pain. The other is filled with fulfillment or movements toward it, and has its own sense of inner joy and bliss. And it's up to us which one we choose. So the very start of our journey is called discernment. We call it viveka, discrimination. And when we forget the journey, and when we forget how we can travel on it, and even maybe forget the nature of the urgency of it, and then at that point, we have to step back and bring the attention back, revise and revalue the world in front, and make a different progress. And progress is never linear. There's always variations of ups and downs. We want a general trend. That's okay. Our human nature is such that we have to form a habit. In the process of forming the habit, will be ups and downs until we get it. It is said that if you want to form a habit, then you have to do the same thing without exception for a minimum of 10 days. If you want to give up bad habits, then form a new habit and make sure that that is, strange as it may be, giving you a new direction, a new experience. And after 10 days, you have a much better chance of entrenching the habit and making it steady. It's the steadiness that we want. Now, in the Kathopanishad, it assumes that we want to take the preferable path. The preferable path is the path which will give the long-term result. It will give us a straightness. There will be no deviations on it. This preferable path will lead us to freedom. What do we mean by freedom? Are we bound? If we are free by our own nature, how is it that we feel bound? This is a very good question. We feel bound because in the normal course of events, we are living within certain constraints that are run by factors. A kind of constant moving factor would be time. It gives us a sense of change. It gives us a sense of direction, in the sense that we are like traveling on a train. We know where we have been, and we know when the train arrives, and we know it's going to go off into the future. And what is very useful and helpful is to say, let's not deal with the future, let's not deal with the past. Let's take this present moment and insert something which is preferable of our own. If you do that, your journey becomes extremely exciting. It becomes very interesting, because every experience, every unitary experience of a second, is filled with something new, something that you consciously, deliberately, decidedly put in for yourself. Now, the preferable path requires concentration. What is concentration? It is a kind of catalyst. It gets you to your destination quicker. It stops all your deviations. Normally, for most people, the mind is in a scattered position. It means the attention wanders everywhere. Well, you can gather that up and you can direct it. Why? Because you are not the attention. The attention is a tool. And for this reason, the Kathopanishad gives us a beautiful example of a journey. And the ancient language, we can update a little bit. So there's a chariot, that's the picture, that's the scenario. The chariot is the body. And the body is attached to horses, and the horses are the senses. We have 10 senses. We have the organs, or the senses, if you will, of information. We take all our knowledge in through them. You can say 5 entry gates to the city that is called the body. And then there are 5 exit gates. That is, import and export is going on in your city. We import things, we do some manufacturing, we export. You can view it in this way. Now, the horses is a very good example, because horses can be temperamental, can be kind. They all have different personalities. I know in Zimbabwe, I once rode a horse for the first time, and they didn't tell me that the horse was an individual with an individual personality, a will of its own, and was extremely calm when I got on the horse, but all of a sudden decided, let me now make every effort to hurl this person from my back in any direction I can. Maybe it was over a fence or something, running vigorously toward a barrier, and suddenly stopping, maybe realizing there's a barrier, or maybe maliciously thinking, let me stop and this poor fellow can carry on. Horses, by their own nature, are wild originally and have to be tamed. They have to be trained. And we can harness the horses, no doubt, they're harnessed. How are they connected to the chariot? They're connected with reins. It's called the mind. The mind is attached to the senses. And the geography of the mind is well worked out by the Sankhya's. They say that the mind is something that is material because it's made from aggregates. Patanjali Yoga Sutras, in its final section, Kaivalya it's called, independence or isolation equates to freedom. And it says there very clearly, you cannot have an aggregate which doesn't disintegrate, number one, but more importantly, all parts gathered together is not for the good of its own self, it's for the good of an independent agent, an independent person. And that person in yogic language is called Purusha. Purusha means a person. Purusha derived from two words, two roots, if you will. Puri, which is a city, and Purna, which is fullness. What we have within us is an indweller of a city, but lest you make the mistake that it is bound by all the boundaries and restrictions and laws of the city, it is also full. It has no boundaries. But we can access it in the inner cave of the heart where it dwells, because it is like the king or a monarch sitting there, and by its presence, everything is moving well. The city is moving well. And when the king is absent, well, there's mayhem, because we can do what we like. So there must be an independent entity, and that independent entity would be the owner or the witness of the chariot, the one that is sitting within the chariot. Then what is the driver? What is holding the reins? A charioteer. That charioteer is the intellect. Now you might think then the intellect has its own mind, and the intellect can drive the horses in any direction it likes. But you see, all analogies break down at some point. And the charioteer is employed, as it were, we can visualize it, like the chauffeur in a car, employed by the passenger. And so it doesn't have instructions of its own. It doesn't have a life of its own. It is borrowed life and light from the occupier of the chariot, which is the Atman or Purusha. And so it's a parable that is given, a beautiful story. See, Atmanam Ratinam Vidhi, Shariram Ratam Evatu. Know the self as the Lord of the chariot, and the body as truly the chariot. Know the intellect as the charioteer, and the mind is truly the reins. So Buddhim tu Sharadhim Vidhi Manaha Pragaham Evacha. See, the idea of the self riding in the chariot, it makes the vehicle a psychophysical vehicle, made from body and mind together. And when we discuss from the yogic point of view, what is the difference between body and mind, we discover it's only a degree of subtlety. So it's instrumental. The body is an instrument, outer instrument, we can classify it as that. And the mind is, we can classify as an internal instrument. Antakarana is a technical term. But independent of that is the one in the chariot. So the self is the lord of the chariot. Now, everything in these Upanishads will be a kind of meditation. So if we want a theme for meditation, we can sit and we can think, okay, without sitting, we are on a journey. Even when we are sitting, we're on a journey because the earth is still spinning. And the earth is spinning around the sun 18 miles a second. And that sun and solar system is progressively making its way over 200,000 years around the galaxy. And the whole galaxy is spinning. And if you add all of these speeds or velocities up, we realize we're traveling pretty fast. But that's not the impression we have. We don't feel it at all. We just feel that we are static, and when we sit, we're stuck sit, and the world is moving around us. A kind of egocentric position, and when we take the earth itself, we adopt a geocentric position. We don't feel it's moving. We feel everything else is moving. It's the sun that's moving. It's the moon that's moving. And all of a sudden, it's daybreak. Everything moved around us. Of course, this was a model for many, many thousands of years ago. And then, of course, we have Copernicus and Galileo and so on and so forth, all indicating, come on, actually, we are moving around the sun. And the sun is relatively static, but the sun itself is spinning. Everything is turning and spinning. But is it just statically doing it? Just locally spinning? Is nothing else happening? Or is the whole thing on a pilgrim journey to find its original fulfillment? So we can extend this example of our individual chariot to the whole universe now. And the Purusha Shuktam indicates this whole universe is something like a colossal divine person with a divine body and divine mind, on the basis that what happens here locally at this minor point here will happen everywhere. A general principle we can adopt. Just that axiom is taken. Now we can make a little bit more sense of the universe. And not only that, but in meditation we can feel this oneness with the universe. There's a famous document, or I think it's not a document, it's a plaque or something like that in St. Paul's Cathedral in London, which is called, I can't remember what it's called now, but somebody will tell me. Anyway, you are a child of the universe. You have a right to be free. It goes on like that. You know, what's it called? Desiderata. Thank you so much. Yes, desiderata. Thank you. Yes, you're a child of the universe. You have a right to be here, and so it goes on like that. You know. So when you feel that, that becomes a meditative experience as well. And we did a meditation earlier, something similar to that. But then you can come locally and say, if this is a chariot, a psychophysical thing, an instrument, where is it taking me? It's taking me wherever you direct it to be taken. And two roads are there that you can choose, the pleasurable and the preferable. How to train these horses? Horses want to go in their own directions everywhere. Oh yes, okay. With their own directions everywhere. But harnessing them gives them a certain kind of restrictive movement. And yet, you see, it's holding the reins and directing them. And to do that, you have to know where the road is. You have to know where the path is, and you have to know the direction. Now, philosophy provides us with the direction, but it's not just an intellectual exercise in philosophy. It's a research. Where is our journey? Where's our destiny? And how seriously will we take it? And if we take it seriously, then we'll take serious disciplined measures. And these measures are outlined in another passage in the Kathopanishad. And it's a very famous passage, often quoted by Swami Vivekananda, because it says, Utishta Jagra Prapyaviran Nibodhata. It starts off like that. And Swami Vivekananda loosely says, arise, awake. Don't stop until the goal is reached. In other words, he outlines a goal from the start. So what is the goal? Well, in another place, in Raja Yoga, Swami Vivekananda describes the goal, familiar to us now, starting off, our status. Each soul is potentially divine. What does that mean? There's a potentiality within us to find our own freedom. And so the goal is to manifest this from within, unfolding it. And in other terms, we call this unfolding evolution. This manifesting we call evolution. It's not a series of changes with no directions. There's no randomness about it. Of course, randomness is locally there because things change. In cellular biology or physiology even, we call this change stoicism. And so there is this variation. In other words, proteins are copied and sometimes there's a mistake. Very rarely, 1 in 100,000, but there are enough backup systems within the cell to make the corrections so that the whole cell is involved in a certain progression toward a certain goal, namely sustaining itself. But why would we want to sustain itself? Because we have a purpose, a function, and a direction. If this is the case, then we have to find which road will we take. Now, everyone in a sense will take his own road because everyone has an individual designed destiny, if you will, based on your individual talents. And when I have children, as you all know, when you have children, and I have them in front of me, say, then I tell them, please look at your hands. And then I ask them, do you have fingerprints? And they say, yes. And some say, what are fingerprints? And you can do finger painting and you'll discover them, or you feel little ridges on your fingers and you look at your friend next door and they have these ridges. Oh, yes, and I have them, yes. And they're not the same. Because when you were born, they were never seen before. And when you die, they'll never be seen again. And that's a mark of your individuality. And at the cellular level, the deoxyribonucleic acid, the nucleus of a cell, your architect, is entirely individual as well. And you can tell a person from another person by reading both fingerprints and the internal cellular fingerprints called DNA. So there's something that you can do and that you can unfold that nobody else in this world can do, nobody has done, nobody ever will do, and it's up to you, and you can do it, and you can find out your place. That makes a wonderful adventure and a sense of adventure. It gives you a sense of purpose. It helps you to explore not only your inner potential, as told by Swami Vivekananda, your divinity, but also the extended expression of that divinity that is there in your personality, is there in your talents, your abilities, the way you look, the way you smile, and your inner way of valuing things will express itself in the face, will express itself in the smile, will express itself in every movement and every magnetic field that we call the body, and you will influence your environment, including the people around you. What a wonderful gift, and everybody has it. Now, when we look at the guidelines on what should we be disciplined at, what is discipline, tapasya, I'm referring here to 17th chapter, the Bhagavad Gita, there are all along how to speak, how to conduct your body, how to, let's take speech for example. Speech should be surely joyful and beneficial to all those around you. Don't drag them down. Don't make my mind a garbage can for your depression and all your rubbish. Don't deposit it in me. You should spread joy. Swami Vivekananda even went as far as this: when you are in a depressed mood, lock yourself in your room. Don't spread this disease anywhere and everywhere. Only spread joy, spread uplifting, inspiring words. Speech, this is discipline of speech. And speech, as we know, can be the most harmful and devastating thing. And it can, on the contrary, be the most uplifting, elevating, inspiring media that you can have. So, unfortunately, when we say media, we're looking at all the media around us, and that is intrinsically negative. Because people have an inner urge for bad news, you know. And when you talk to some people in some region of the world, the beginning conversation is the weather. And that's all they have. And if it's not the weather, it might be the traffic on the M, whatever it is. And the people tend to delight in pessimism for some reason or other, because the world is seen to be pessimistic in this way. The world is seen to be intrinsically negative, and we have to get from the negative to the positive, but this is not our road. Our road is something like what Jesus says: I am the way. Even the road is divine. Even the road is the glorious internal self that religion calls God. The chariot it's not separate. In the example, in the parable, you might think that the chariot is separate. But on proper analysis, you'll see, oh, that inner Lord of the chariot, when you access that, everything else goes and disappears. Now you have found your goal. That is complete perfection and fullness. Be ye perfect as your Father in heaven, says Jesus. How is it possible? It's your own nature. It's not that you have to get something. It's not that you're born defective and you have to go and get something. So there was a question given to me by email, and the questioner may well be here, in fact is here, picking up something of what I said the other day, that we are not saved by something external. And there's a theology that puts it more specifically. We are saved by the blood of Jesus. He removes all our sins and so on. It's a theological idea, but we won't stress on it. If you say, I'm a sinner, you'll be a sinner. If you say, I'm weak, you'll be weak. Conversely, if you assert strong, you'll be strong. When you utter a word and repeat it and reinforce it and underline it, the value of it and the property of it comes out in this chariot that is our psychophysical unit. That makes it a better chariot. It makes it more efficient. And knowing the fact that we can control this chariot and take it to any destiny we choose, we have to exert our strength and our energy. But the first thing we have to do is we have to wake up. We have to generate some level of enthusiasm. We have to have a strong desire to go where we want to go. And if that desire is not there, if that yearning is not there, if the thirst is not there, then we'll be quite happy to make diversions, not knowing that the destiny is much better. You can go on a road to a certain destination with this in mind. Let me take a holiday. Let me go down to the sea somewhere. Let us say off the coast of Cork or something. And then on the way, somebody says, oh, did you visit this cave, this limestone caves? And you go in and you visit the limestone caves. And then you say, I like this place. I think I'll stay there for 3 days. And you linger there for 3 days and you enjoy that, that's fine. And then sometimes you forget, where was I going? What was I doing? In your, as you get older, you find many episodes of this. You're going up the stairs. Where was I going? Why was I doing it? What was the purpose? Only because, you see, you didn't have continuously in mind where you were going and how you were going, getting there. And this awareness is called mindfulness. This mindfulness, this training the concentration is required. Driving a chariot is no mean feat. But let's take another example. In that great 19th century mystic's life that we follow, Sri Ramakrishna, he once went to a circus. And there he saw a woman on the back of a horse, and she balanced on one foot. And there would have been hoops, and she jumped through them and landed on the same foot, and landed without losing her balance on the horse's back. And the horse is all the time going round the circuit. And Ramakrishna marveled at this. And he uses it as an example of concentration. This lady must have practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced. Maybe in the beginning, she did it a few times, lost her balance. Maybe she fell on hay or something. And then she got up and did it again. In other words, an element of determination was necessary. A desire to do it was necessary. Determination was necessary. And dedication, repeated and steady practice, until she can do it with such apparent ease, as if it was just second nature to her. But it's not. It requires effort and practice. So the first thing we have to do is we have to create a level of alertness there. Having chosen a path, having chosen the way, we then have to say, let me now engender an element of enthusiasm that has the same effect as somebody putting cold water on you. It has the same effect as a shock. And when you wake up, you arise, you get up. Just as when you wake up in the morning or whenever it is, then the next thing is you get up. So we can say arise, awake. We can say awake, arise also. Having attained the boons, understand them, having attained all the gifts that we have, all our resources, all the instrumentation, the whole chariot that we have is a gift we never asked for, a gift we wanted because the inner urge for perfection is there, and therefore the corresponding instrumentation will also be there. So this drive for perfection is itself a gift. And we have to have our own grace, we have to have the grace of the divine, but we have to have the grace of our own minds. Without the grace of your mind, you won't go anywhere. So we have to be kindly to our mind. It is a revealing factor. Our difficulty is we are peering through the mind, and the mind is like a kind of kaleidoscope, I think you call it, where it breaks things up into different colors. Things seem fragmented, things seem individually spaced out. We see the variabilities and variations in life, but these are just apparitions. These are just seeming split up things, and the fragmenter is the mind. But the mind is also the revealer. When the power of the mind is harnessed, and when attention is directed like a laser beam, unrelentingly, it reveals anything. Concentration will reveal anything, any truth in the material world, in the scientific world. Do you have any examples for that? Yes, Einstein is being registered as a genius. But when we look, how did he manage things? He pondered over and over and over again, looking at things from here, looking at things from there, and all of a sudden an aha moment, looking as if it came to me from the outside. It came to me. Where? From the outside? No, from the inside. Because you mulled over it, you churned the soil relentlessly until it yielded something. So this is the process, and it is called concentration. Now we can also call this yoga as well, because yoga, the yoga philosophy, can be defined as concentration. So utishta jagrata prapyavaran nibodhata. See, kshurasya dhara nishita duratyaya durgan patos tat kavayo udanti. The second part is very, very interesting. Sharp as the edge of a razor and hard to cross, difficult to tread is that path. And the writer or the author or the rishi of this Upanishad is humble enough to say, so sages declare. So Vedanti, they declare. Why would they declare? Because they have seen it, they have understood it, and they have taught generations. So for generations, people have discovered this truth. Now, come back to the example of this lady on the horse. It required concentration, not only practice, but determination, dedication. It required repeated practice, and it required concentration, so that even when the skill is acquired, a moment or a momentary lapse in concentration, and that one foot will stumble and fall. Now, what a dramatic example. Walking on the edge of a razor, of a sharp object. At the circus, we may have seen tightrope walking and wonder, that's very clever. And a person who wants to be entertaining can artificially wobble a little bit, as if they're falling off. And holding an umbrella, maybe for a little balance, or a pole, just to make sure that a balance is maintained. But the edge of a razor is much more dramatic. So sharp as the edge of a razor, the way of religion is never easy, or the way of spirituality. Now, what is the difference? Religion and spirituality. If you define religion as realization, then it is spirituality is to do with the journey, the spirit with which you take it. The inner driving force is spirit, and the end is spirit. And the Taittiriya then, Upanishad declares, we come from that. We're going toward that, and we are the road. We are the road, we are the journey, we are the destination, and we find this out, ultimately, that we are all of it. So, on the edge of a razor, strive to enter in at the straight gate or the small gate, said Jesus. For the narrow is the gate, and straighten the way that leads to life, and few be they that find it, according to Matthew's Gospel. So, the self, what is this? What is this ultimate discovery? Well, we can more easily identify what it is not. And so the next stanza will tell us, it will say, Ashabdam aparsam arupam avyayam tata alasam nityam agandhavach chayat. It begins like that. The self is without sound. You can't hear it. It's without touch. It's without form. It's undecaying. Is likewise without taste, eternal, without smell, without beginning, without end. It's beyond the great, abiding by discerning that one is freed. Freed from what? From the face of death. Because all of these Upanishads are steered toward one theme. When you understand and realize this perfection and fullness, you've actually gone beyond death, because you've gone beyond change. You've gone beyond transformation. And immortality is what we want. It's what we're all seeking. Every Hollywood star wants it, but they try to find it in plastic or some other means. Never mind. There's an inner drive toward it. That inner drive itself is the internal spirit urging us on continuously, and that urging gives us momentum along the journey. So how do we learn to do this? We have to have a great deal of patience. We have to practice. We have to make sure it is repeated. We have to make sure it is regular. We have to make sure that the attention is constantly tuned into the glory of the self, and we have to make that a repeated practice. Automatically tuning in, so that automatically the mind is there constantly. And whenever it wanders and wavers, we tune it back again. This is the art of spiritual practice. The Atman, that is, that inner entity, it's not an object of any sort. So it's not as if our goal is to be achieved in an objective way, because it has no characteristics, no mind, no limbs, it's not framed within time, it has no moving parts, it has no change in evolution. How can we know it? And so we'll know it when we know it. It's the same as, how will you know when you have arrived at the top of Mount Everest? You will know. If you've never been to a destination, how will you know when it's there? You'll know when you're there. It'll be self-evident. So don't worry about it. Post your goal and leave it, and then concentrate on maneuvering these horses and this chariot in the chosen way that you want. This ancient story that is this Katha Upanishad is referring to is the story of Nachiketa. And Nachiketa himself as a character, as a personality, gives us huge, tremendous inspiration. So arise awake and don't stop until the goal is reached. This is Swami Vivekananda's version of this exhortation. Now, many people are afraid of going on a spiritual path. There's a book I have in front of me called Walking on the Razor's Edge, is the title of the chapter, is exactly what we've just been discussing. So he says like this, and this is from Swami Yatisharananda, a very saintly and prominent monk of the Ramakrishna order. He had some time in the West, he had some time in Germany and Switzerland also, and he became vice president of the Ramakrishna Math and Mission and Order. He says, many people are afraid of following the spiritual path. But if we had the real training, we would not be afraid at all. Is it just child's play to drive a motor car? Well, in the beginning, no, it's not. Those people going for driving lessons will know and will have a wonderful, wonderful effect on the driving instructor, a frightening one, of course. Is it possible for an untrained person to fly an airplane or to skate or ski? And his own reply is no. These are all dangerous sports and pastimes. But if one is properly trained, one may do all these things with control and grace. Not just control, but grace as well. Scriptural practice, what do we mean by with grace? It means with poise. There's a smoothness. It's not erratic. It's not clumsy. It's well jointed. It's smooth. It's gliding. It's graceful. It's artistic. Is it possible for an untrained person to do any of these things? The answer is no. And spiritual practice is extremely necessary if we want to live in the world rightly and want to make spiritual progress. And then he mentions this incident of Sri Ramakrishna where he sees this performer on the horse. He says, as in every walk of life, so also in spiritual life, there are dangers to be avoided and obstacles to be overcome. But that makes the journey very pleasant because the obstacles are there, but the equipment to get around them is also there. If you have thorns on the road, don't complain, what a pity, what a pity. Put tough boots on and say, what a glory, and get around them. Face them nicely. Do it with a sense of adventure, a spirit of joy. He continues, it is the tendency to live a fashionable religion. This is possible so long as one doesn't have spiritual hunger. What do we mean by fashionable religion? It means do your religious duty and say, yes, I'm a religious person. What do you do? I go to church on a Sunday. And while you're there, what do you do? Well, I hope this finishes soon because I have football. Or something of that nature, And a wonderful series of exercises anyway. Stand up, sit down, sing this, sing that, do this, do that. So religion taking as a superficial thing, in some cases to fulfill an obligation or a felt obligation, in some cases for social activity. In some cases, now I have to contrast this. In Africa, there are families every Sunday who go to mission churches and they spend the whole day there. Did you ever go to Chishawasha?
I went to a couple of the American churches that were set up in
Oh.
Harare. Yeah.
Okay. And the same thing, some of them called Maposto, they gather under trees, and they spend the whole day there. It's a whole event, and they sing and they have a wonderful time. It's a social event. It's like a holiday for them. And they meet old friends and they talk and so on and so forth. But you see, that spirit of involvement, that spirit of sacredness is carried with them. And along with that is an earnestness. And if you just dismiss it as, okay, I did my duty and that's all there is to it, or there's a legalistic aspect to it, see, and that becomes a dogmatic thing. This is a kind of superficial religion that says we'll bring it out when we want, or when we're in trouble even, and otherwise we'll keep God in the closet till Sunday. So there has to be some shift. There has to be this hunger, this thirst. That's really the starting point of your journey. But now what happens if you don't have it? Then pray for it. But when this hunger is born in the soul, one yearns for divine realization, and one cannot then sit quiet. One is urged to follow the spiritual path, which takes him nearer and nearer to the ultimate goal. If you expect to go and climb Mount Everest, you won't do it with a sauntering attitude. You'll train. You won't go via two extremes. One is, let me do it tomorrow. No training. You will fail. Or let me train and build up my skill progressively and sustain my discipline with it, and take it so seriously that no practice lapses, and I'll do the necessary steps progressively. So one cannot then sit quiet. You can't take a sauntering attitude. One is urged to follow the spiritual path, which takes him nearer and nearer to the ultimate goal. That's the best way. Our teachers tell us, he says, that the human birth is a great privilege. Having attained this human birth, if a person just leads the life of an animal, it's a great pity. The idea is this: through eons and eons of unfolding, that is our evolution, we arrived at the privileged position where we have all this beautiful equipment. We now have the chariot, we have the charioteer, and we have the reins, and we have the horses. Now what will you do with it? Will you waste it? So one may read no end of books, one may listen to no end of lectures, but if one's mind is not inclined to the spiritual ideal, then everything has been so vain. Now, inclined, that means we have to be in the mood, and we have to cultivate the mood, sometimes artificially. If you want to shift your mood rapidly, play music. Music has the instant effect. If you want to be quiet, thoughtful, play some quiet, thoughtful music. If you want to be active and energetic, play energizing music. You'll see very, very quickly your mood will change. So in India, he says, the spiritual teachers tell us, you must win the grace of what? Of your own mind. Your own mind has to be persuaded. It is not enough. If we have the grace of God and the grace of a teacher, we might have been fortunate in receiving many spiritual instructions, but unless we have the grace of our own mind, everything comes to nothing. Our mind must be open to truth. How do we make the mind open to truth? Well, we remove all the restrictive superstitious elements from it, all the prejudgments from it. An open mind. Somebody once said to me, I used to have an open mind, but then my brains fell out. So it's not an open mind in that sense. We have to have a liberality that doesn't prejudge anything, accepts everything, values it well, and sees the good in whatever is presented, and sees the utility in whatever is presented. Utility meaning that we see how it can be used to urge us on in our journey. For example, if you're walking on this Camino, then somebody might offer you a sturdy stick. Please accept it, take it, and that will help you. So our mind must be open to truth. Now, even if the mind is open to truth, even if we possess a real love for the spiritual ideal, still training is necessary. Good training is necessary, even in worldly pursuits. We cannot do work of any kind without the necessary education and practice. Now, these Upanishads that we've been studying, and these lectures and all the rest of it, this is the education part of it. But the practice is up to you. And sometimes I remember we used to have talks with a lesson in them. And the following week I might say, so what did you implement from the last talk? So the same is true of spiritual life. Here is an anecdote, he says, to illustrate the point. So he tells of a young man. I'll read the story. A young man who had no special training was over anxious to get a position as an executive. So he goes to the company and he asks one of the vice presidents, what's the vice presidency all about? Or we have different departments, it's a very high position, well paid. He says, well, I'd like to be one. He says, well, we have enough of them. We have 12 of them. He says, all right, I'm not superstitious. I can be the 13th. And then the official was interviewing him and he said, I'm sorry, we don't have any vacancies. We already have 12 vice presidents. But the vice presidents are not made that way. They're not made numerically. They're not filled in, okay, I have 12. We can have an additional one there. It's not like that. They are trained. They earn the position. And similarly, if you want to attain the highest goal, if you want to walk on the edge of this razor, then you need special training. You need razor walking training. And you will be cut to pieces if you make an attempt without the training, the razor will cut you. But if you're properly trained, there's absolutely no fear. You may even find pleasure in walking on this edge of a razor because it's such a beautiful example. It gives you a sense of excitement. Not only is there a skill, but there's a risk involved. And it's a delightful risk if you take it that way. People do many, many things, many apparently crazy things in the name of adventure. So we all know what happens to a weak electric wire when a high voltage electric current is passed through it. The wire will just burn up. And in the same way, without proper preparation, we want to be in tune with the cosmic spirit. Now that's a very important phraseology. So great will the pressure be that our body, our nerves, our mind will not be able to bear it. This is a fact. So in order to follow the spiritual path, we need a strong body, a strong mind, and intellect, and strong senses. Using the analogy of the chariot, we have to make sure the horses are well fed, it's okay, well looked after, and that they're disciplined. We have to make sure that the reins are firm and solid. We have to make sure that the intellect evaluates properly and knows which direction to take. Strength. Strength is a key attribute. So, strong body. Some people ask, what does physical health do? I often ask when I'm in groups who are familiar with Hatha Yoga, I say, what has yoga to do with health and well-being? And many of them answered, everything. And I say, well, very little. Very little. Then what's the point of it? Well, it's an instrument. You have to make it strong. How do you do that? By any sensible means. Eat the right food that gives you nourishing strength. Do the right exercise. Make sure that the body, the lymph system is moving, is made to move through bending, called yoga exercise. Make sure the heart is healthy through walking or cycling or running or any of these aerobic kinds of activities. But make sure that the mind is also strong and that the mind is filled with joy. Because if the mind is filled with joy, the body will catch on. It'll pick the clue up and become joyful. Digestion will be joyful. The renewal of the cells will be joyful. The distribution of nourishment will be joyful. The muscular system will take up the theme of joy. The nerves will vibrate well with joy and emit the magnetic field of joy. All of this will happen. And then the intellect, all of this has to be strong. So these are some thoughts on the theme, the road to spiritual freedom. Good, thanks. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Yes.
Everest?
Everest, yes.
And Razor's Edge.
Yes, yes, yes. And Everest is not a place where we ever rest. Okay.
I like it. Pulling jokes.
In a sense, of course, it is. Because when you get to the top, then you relax. It's done. It's achieved. And you look out. We've never experienced it, you see, most people. But you can see from YouTube videos these days, people climbing up in the most difficult circumstances. And there you see, they feel it's all worthwhile. And actually, relatively speaking, very few get to the top. Don't be discouraged by it. But still, the thought, the inspiration of doing that occurs to so many people that Mount Everest has been something like a difficult ecological place and issue and so on and so forth, with base camp being littered with all kinds of debris and so on now. And I think now there are restrictions in Nepal about that. Yeah.
And Razor's Edge.
Razor's Edge, yes, yes. What a beautiful extreme example, But imagine now, you see, that you have the equipment to do that. But the idea of a razor's edge. Now, let's take the idea of a razor away and take the example of walking in a mountain. Walking in a mountain with a very, very narrow, rocky ridge. Ridge is the word, yeah. Okay. And you could, one small misstep will put you over the edge. So it requires huge concentration. And so even if somebody shouts at you or says, oh, look there, you definitely won't look. You'll just carry on. If somebody throws apples at you, don't stop to catch them. Just carry on.
Did you see that film about the French guy who walked a tightrope between the two World Trade Centers?
Oh,
it's
no.
a fantastic film.
Okay.
It's true.
Yes. Yeah.
Completely true. And he legally strung a wire between the two towers and walked over, and the police tried to get him, and he kind of mocked them, and he jumped around.
Come and catch me.
Went back again a second time, and he just couldn't fall. He just such tension.
Yes. Yeah.
It reminds me, maybe 2 months ago, I was hill walking.
Yes.
And the last little bit was really, really, really demanding. And I had said to my companion, I will be giving all my focus into my boots. Right in. And I'd never done it quite like this. To the extent that I couldn't reply to conversation. So I got up to the top. But that evening, I remembered everything that had been said, even though there was no indication, I didn't involve because I was so focused. And that was quite extraordinary to think that the brain took in that information, even though there wasn't the interaction.
Yes, there's a kind of watching post within the mind, an alertness which is there that decides even, and this is the intellect also, that decides, okay, so I won't listen to this, but I'll put it in my tray and I'll read it later. And so the ears are still open.
It's amazing.
And there's a part of the mind that's still listening, yes.
It's receiving. It's like,
yeah.
But I just kept pure consciousness
Yeah.
right into the boots.
Very good. Now, how do we add an extra joy to that? We say, oh, I am the way, says the Lord. Okay, so this is the divine itself, the infinite invisible presented in this way, and provides me with a path and provides me with the attention to use it and to put all my energy, psychic energy called concentration, into that unit activity, step by step. And then to have enough capacity left over to say, and in moments of leisure, when I sit down and go in and make an inner connection that we call meditation, I will recall the whole glory of it. And the replay of that is also the Lord. See, the Bhagavad Gita is remarkable. I am responsible for memory as well as its loss. Don't beat yourself up if you forgot something. It's there, and the filing officer will bring it up eventually. You just have to look. Come on, a librarian will take. Yes, bring it out at some stage rather. If we are impatient about it, it won't happen. The librarian will say, wait, okay, in my good time, And the fact that you pressed me, I'll do it this afternoon. Okay. All right. All good. Good. So we leave it up there, I think.